March 25th of 1993, a woman named Cheryl Jenkins and her friend Wendy Sweeney were out delivering papers on their paper route. They were out in Thompson Township on Sidley Road at around 9 o'clock in the morning. And as they were driving down the road, they saw what they first thought was a baby doll laying in the road. They turn around and come back to take a closer look. And when they get out of the vehicle and look at what they thought was a baby doll, they realized this was actually a human child, a real human child, who had, it appeared, had been run over by a car. Looks like maybe animals had gotten to him, an arm had been ripped off, a leg had been ripped off, skin across his back had been torn off, showing his organs. So Cheryl and Wendy contact a nearby homeowner who called the police. You're going to hear from Cheryl about what she remembers seeing that day. So the sheriff's office responds, and you're going to hear from Chief Scott Neas, who's the current police chief, but back then was a detective with the sheriff's office. And Chief Neas documented the scene with pictures. So as we talked about in jury selection, you will see a picture of the child as he was found in the road that morning. But Chief Neas accompanied the child to the local hospital where a formal declaration of death was made. He then followed that child's body to the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office, where ultimately an autopsy was performed the next day. Further, after the autopsy is done, several days later, Chief Neas decides, he's going to go back out to the scene, just look around for any further evidence. And he finds about 1/8 of a mile from where the body was found in the woods, a garbage bag. And upon closer look, it appears the garbage bag has been torn open, and inside that garbage bag is a smaller clear bag that contains a reddish watery substance that he presumes to be blood. So that garbage bag and the bag inside are taken into evidence, ultimately also sent out to the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office for preservation of evidence. Now, Chief Neas stays at the Sheriff's Office until 2014 when he becomes the Chief of Police, and during that time, there are multiple efforts in this investigation to identify a suspect. Nothing ever comes of it. And so when Chief Neas leaves, it's still an open, unsolved case. Next, you're going to hear from Dr. Joseph Philo, who is the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office. Now, the autopsy in this case was performed back in 1993 by a man named Dr. Challoner. Dr. Challoner has since passed away, but Dr. Philo has taken over the case. He has reviewed Dr. Challoner's findings. He's reviewed the autopsy report with photographs. Then he's done his own analysis of some lung tissue slides that were taken of the one remaining lung in the infant's body. And based upon that, he agrees with Dr. Challoner's findings that the child was born alive because there's evidence that the child was breathing on his own. The ultimate conclusion of cause of death that they come to is undetermined violent cause. You're going to hear from Dr. Philo that means, while they can't say exactly sure what the ultimate cause of death was, it was not natural. It was not a situation where the child was born with some birth defects that would have rendered him either stillborn or caused him to die soon after birth. He didn't have an infection that would have killed him. He was an otherwise healthy baby boy, and either some action or failure to act in just doing general care for the child is what caused the death of that child. Finally, you're going to hear from Detective Donald Seaman. Now, Detective Seaman took over this investigation in around 2018. And again, still no leads on anyone at this point. But Detective Seaman had heard about a process that was used to identify a killer in California, where DNA was sent to a lab where they processed it and then inserted it into one of these publicly available online databases where people can trace their genealogy. So he thought this was an opportunity for us to maybe try to trace back who the mother of this child was. So that's sent out to a place called Parabon Labs, and they returned to him a list of identified people who are very, very distant relatives of the child. And unfortunately, this is a publicly available website called GenMatch. You don't have to put in your real name. You can just use usernames. There wasn't a lot of help from the results that he got back. But there was one name that appeared to be a real person, and it had been submitted by a man named Vern Holden, who I believe lived out in Colorado. And so Detective Seaman spoke with Vern Holden, got his assistance. He was very into genealogy. And then Detective Seaman on his own did an extensive investigation of birth and death records and compiled a family tree of about 1,400 people to try to trace back the individual that was named in that GEDmatch result back to see where it meets up with the child in this case. Ultimately, after extensive investigation, he tracks he narrows things down to who he believes might be the grandparents of the child. And in May of 2019, he goes out to that residence, speaks with the individuals, and based on some comments made by them, he then gets a search warrant for the DNA from Gail Ritchie and her husband. Several weeks later, he goes out to speak to Gail Ritchie. And upon approach, he asks her if she knows what this is about, and she says it's about a baby who was left. And she comes back to the sheriff's office for a full interview. And during that interview, she admits that back in 1993, she was pregnant. She says that she didn't tell anyone about it, that she was very heavy, so no one knew. And she says that by herself, she gave birth to a baby boy in the bathroom. She then took that baby boy and put him in a garbage bag. She took that garbage bag and put it in the trunk of her car. And she doesn't remember if it's a day or two later or a couple weeks later, but she ultimately dumps that child in the woods. She had gone to a camp that was close by where the baby was found. She says that she was going out there for some type of retreat, and on a break, she just drove somewhere and dumped the baby. They take her DNA. It's sent to the lab. It confirms that she is the mother of the child who the community has come to know as Giaga's child. It confirms that her now husband, Mark Ritchie, was the father. And it also confirms that both her DNA and the DNA of the baby Giaga's child matches the blood and fluids that were found in that garbage bag.
Let me tell you what really happened 29 years ago today that brings us into this courtroom. Back in the summer of 1992, Gail Ritchie was known by her maiden name, Gail Eastwood. She was 22 years old. She was living with her mom, her dad, and her younger sister in a small bungalow-style home in Lyndhurst, Ohio, where she grew up. She was active in the Lyndhurst Baptist Church. She was the director of the church's youth group. She was working full-time Monday through Friday as a nanny, watching two young children for a couple that lived in Shaker Heights. She was in a dating relationship with a man by the name of Mark Ritchie, who would later become her husband. Sometime in the fall, September or October 1992, she realized that she had missed several of her periods. That prompted her to go take a pregnancy test. And that pregnancy test was positive. And she knew that. But there was a part of her, a big part of her, that simply couldn't accept it. She could not accept the fact that she was pregnant. Not mentally, not emotionally, not subconsciously, not physically could she come to accept that she was pregnant. She never received any prenatal care. She never wore any maternity clothes. When she took the pregnancy test, she had no idea how far along she was in her pregnancy. She had no idea when her due date would have been. She never told anybody that she was pregnant. And then one day, in late February 1993, either a Monday or a Tuesday, she went to work at the home of David Cantor and his wife Mary Ellen, the couple that she worked as a nanny for. They lived in Shaker Heights, Ohio. She would go there Monday through Friday, typically get there at 7 a.m., make the kids breakfast, see the oldest off to elementary school, drive the youngest to preschool. Just another day. And when the sometime 11:30 or so in the morning, as is typical, she goes and picks up the youngest child from preschool, who is only half a day, comes home, makes the girl lunch. As is typical, the girl would then go upstairs for an hour and a half or so of quiet time. And Gail felt the need to have a bowel movement. So she went into the half bath just off the kitchen, sat down on the toilet, felt the urge to push, and less than 30 minutes later, birthed a stillborn baby. The baby didn't make a sound. The baby didn't move. Still attached, the umbilical cord, the placenta, all came out of her all in one big push. She was scared. She had no idea what to do. She went into the kitchen. She grabbed a few rags, cleaned up as best as she could, got a black garbage bag from underneath the sink, put the baby, the body, the placenta still attached to the umbilical cord, all in the bag, took it out to the trunk, put it in the trunk of her car, where it remained for the next several days, till later in that week, when she drove several high school age girls that were part of her youth church group out to Geneva, Ohio, to Camp Koinonia, where there was an annual weekend church retreat. And she took the opportunity to whisk away when the opportunity presented itself. She drove a few miles into some rural place in Geauga County that she had no idea where she was at, parked her car, walked the bag that had the stillborn baby's body and placenta a few hundred yards into the woods, left it there under a tree, went back to the retreat. Some 31 or 2 days, depending if it was that Monday or Tuesday later, the body was discovered. And that's what really happened 29 years ago that brings us into this courtroom. As I said, when Gail sat down on that toilet, she had no idea she was giving birth. She felt the need to push once she sat down. And that's exactly what she did. It was an uncontrollable urge. And it was a very short period of time. And she had no contractions. She never felt her water break. There was no real significant pain. Very little blood. As I said, within 15 to 30 minutes, the baby, the umbilical cord, and the placenta all came out and into the toilet. Didn't make a sound, didn't move. And as I described earlier, she was scared. She cleaned up, put a couple rags in her crotch. Didn't know what to do. Put the stillborn baby's body into that garbage bag, into the trunk. It sat there for the next several days. She didn't know what to do. And the evidence and testimony will be overwhelmingly clear that this baby was never born alive. She didn't do anything to purposely cause the death. This was a stillborn baby.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Shirley Jenkins, Jenkins.
And Ms. Jenkins, where are you from?
Essex County.
Are you currently employed?
Well, not a regular job. I just help somebody clean.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention back to March 25th of 1993. Do you remember that day?
Mm-hmm.
And I need you to say yes and no.
Yes.
The court reporter has to take down
Okay.
what you're saying. I'd like to direct your attention to around 9 o'clock that morning. Do you remember who you were with at that time?
Wendy Sweeney.
And what
Or
were
Wendy Hernandez.
is that her current name?
I don't know what she's going by right now.
Okay.
Because she was married and then they got divorced.
Okay. At the time, was she Wendy Sweeney?
She was married.
Oh, okay. And what were you two up to that morning?
Delivering papers.
Was that a job that you held at that time?
I helped her with doing a route for her dad.
And did anything out of the ordinary occur that morning while you were delivering papers?
Yeah, we were driving down the road and it looked like a baby doll on the side of the road. And I told Wendy, I said, after we get done delivering the paper down here, turn around and check it out. And I got out and it was a baby.
Now, do you remember what road that happened on?
Sidley,
And do you know in what county that is located?
I believe Jaga County.
Now, you said you first thought it was a baby doll?
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you can say yes and no.
Yes.
Thank you. But you said you later got out and actually looked at the child?
Yes.
About how quickly did you realize it was an actual child as opposed to a baby doll?
Well, when I saw the blood running down his nose, I knew it was a baby.
And can you describe the state of the child as you saw it?
He was missing an arm and a leg and the skin on his belly. He was in bad shape.
So what did you and Wendy do when you realized this was an actual child?
I ran up to the house that was right there and had her call the police.
Or were you still on scene when the police arrived?
Yeah.
Once they arrived, did you have any further involvement with them? Did you speak to anybody?
Yeah, they were asking us questions about babies. I said, my son's in the back of the car. He was like 1 year old at that time. And Wendy can't have kids. So I can't even remember when we did our statements. I don't know if it was there or later on. I'm not sure.
Okay. When you say statements, do you mean written statements about what you observed?
Yeah.
So then, other than providing written statements, and then other than meeting with us to get ready for trial, did you have any other involvement in the case after that day?
You got the answer, yes, sir?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay.
Mr. Bradley, cross-examination.
We have no questions of this witness, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. You may be excused. If you want to remain in the courtroom, you're free to do so now.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My full name is William Scott Niehus, Niehus.
And where are you currently employed?
Currently employed at the Chardon Police Department.
Are you a certified peace officer in the state of Ohio?
I am.
And what position do you currently hold with the Chardon Police
I'm
Department?
currently the chief of police.
How long have you been the chief of police?
Going on just shy of 8 years.
Okay. So if I were to direct your attention to March 25th of 1993, what position did you hold at the sheriff's office at that
I was a
time?
detective at that point.
And do you remember that day, March 25th?
I do.
Did you respond to a call that morning?
I did.
And do you remember what that call was about?
Yes, I was on duty in the detective bureau that day with Supervisor Bob Phillips, who was my boss at that point. We were informed that the body of an infant had been found in Thompson Township, and we responded to that call.
And in what county is Thompson Township located?
Geauga County.
Do you remember who was on scene when you arrived?
When we arrived there, Sergeant Tom Dewey was present. I believe he was the first deputy sheriff that had arrived there. I also remember seeing Sheriff Simmons, Chief Deputy Lingle. There were a number of Thompson Fire Department personnel there. I would say somewhere between 5 and 7 fire department personnel. The chief of the Thompson Township Police Department was there. And then there were also some neighbors that were in close proximity to the scene there.
And what was your initial duty that you were assigned when you arrived on scene?
Upon arrival there, I was assigned by Chief Deputy Lingle to interview 2 ladies that had found the body.
And after interviewing them, what was your next duty?
So I actually spent some time with them. I pulled them into the detective car. I obtained verbal statements from them at that point, and then when we were complete with that, then I took photographs of the scene. So,
Chief, obviously we see the picture here, but what were the things that you noted about the body that you determined were significant when you were documenting this?
A couple of things. First is that the infant had obviously been dismembered. It was missing left arm, right leg, and a large part of his torso and lower abdomen were missing. In looking at it, it appeared to be a tire track over the top of it. Also significant to what we saw at the scene there was that there appeared to be debris within what was the remains of the child. That we would later look at, but we wanted to photograph here, and you can see that up in the area of the nostril there's what appears to be a pine needle.
And do you remember, were there items like that throughout the body, or was it just?
It was throughout, both front and back.
And since we're talking about that now, you mentioned a pine needle. Any other type of debris that you remember?
There was road debris. There was, meaning in terms of gravel, mud, looked like some leaves, and then also like kind of like a plant material on the backside, like brown vegetative material.
So, after documenting the scene, did you have any other involvement with the actual body of the child that day?
I did. That day, my recollection is it was sometime afternoon, shortly after noon, when the body was removed from the scene. I was assigned to go with Geauga County Coroner's investigator John Doring to Geauga Hospital at that time with Rittendaro Funeral Services. The body was transported to Geauga Hospital, where the body was pronounced by Dr. Kimborowicz.
When you mean pronounced?
Time of death was assigned.
Okay. And after what happened at, the pronouncement of time of death at the hospital, what happened to the body?
So after we did an initial examination at the hospital, or a closer examination at the hospital, and from that point the body was transferred to the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office.
Now, if the body was found here in Geauga County, why would he be transported to Cuyahoga County?
That was a matter of practice in those days, and in fact it still remains our practice. It goes to Cuyahoga County because they're set up to do the full autopsy. They have the staff to do it, and the ability to do the complete autopsy in Cuyahoga County. So there's an agreement between Geauga and Cuyahoga County for that to happen.
Okay. So the child was transported there. Did you go with the body?
I did.
Okay. And so what happened at the coroner's office on March 25th?
So when we arrived at the coroner's office, I was with investigator John Doring, who introduced me to some of the staff. I had been to the coroner's office before, but I didn't have the relationships there like investigator Doring did. So he introduced me to some of the staff, and including Dr. Challender, who was the attending deputy coroner on this case. We met with him as he did the preliminary examination of the baby's body.
Was the autopsy actually conducted that day, the 25th?
It was not.
Okay. Do you remember when the autopsy was conducted?
It was, I believe it was conducted the next day.
And were you there for that?
I was present for the autopsy.
Now, following the autopsy, and so that would have been the 26th, correct? That's the next day.
So, yes, that's correct.
Did you ever have any reason to return to the scene for any purposes? The scene of where the child was found?
I did, and several times, but most significantly, the following Sunday. So the baby's body was found on the 25th, which was a Thursday. That following Sunday, Richard Judd, who was a Middlefield policeman that had been assigned to the Detective Bureau to assist us, with Patrolman Judd and myself, went back up to the area where the baby's body had been found, and we conducted some additional inspection of that area. We walked along the ditch line, just looking to see if we could find anything that may have been missed or that we hadn't seen upon the first blush of this.
And did you in fact find anything of note?
We did, and actually one of the things that was a little different is that we went further out. We walked the ditch line from the area where the baby's body was found on both sides of the street, from Sidley Road in the area where it was the body had been discovered, towards both north and south, but significantly we went south on Sidley to Mosley Road, and Mosley Road we went back to the west. And as we were doing that, we discovered a garbage bag in the woods line, and the wood lines approximately 2 to 3/10 of a mile. It would have been west of Sidley Road on the west side of the street. So that garbage bag we looked at closer because it was into the tree line is where it was located. When we got up to it, we looked at it. The first thing that I noticed about it was that it was tied on one end, on the end that would commonly be open that you would deposit things into. That end was tied, and the bag had been breached, and it looked like it had been torn open to me. Upon looking at it closer, there was another plastic bag inside of that. It was a clear plastic bag that had red material in it, what appeared to be a red liquid.
Please state your name for the record.
Joseph Philo,
And where are you employed?
at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office in Cleveland, Ohio.
What is your position there?
I am a forensic pathologist and the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner for Cuyahoga County.
Now, in the course of your career, how many autopsies have you actually performed?
4,298.
In your position as Chief Deputy Medical Examiner, have you had the opportunity to become involved in a case involving a baby boy doe from back in 1993?
Yes, I have.
And does the case number 09326 sound familiar to you?
Yes.
Do you know, well, I guess I'll start out, were you the original coroner on this case?
No, I was not.
Do you know who was?
Yes, I do.
And who is that?
Dr. Robert Challoner. He was at the time the Chief Deputy Coroner for Cuyahoga County.
And did you personally know Dr. Challoner?
Yes, he's responsible for training me, so he's my mentor.
And is Dr. Challoner still alive?
No, he sadly passed a couple of years back.
So, Doctor, in looking at Dr. Challoner's external examination of the body, is there anything in this picture that's noted in the report that is of any significance to the findings in this case?
Yes, there are. There's hopefully appreciated that the left arm is missing. That was not submitted with the body, and that is described as an avulsion or tearing away of the left arm from the torso. He's also missing his right leg, and that's also apparent in the State's Exhibit 9. Near his back, there's some brown discolorations. Those are underlying skin soft tissues because most of the skin of the back was missing.
And Doctor, if I can direct your attention to sort of the center of the picture, what is this object?
Just above the 9 and 3 is the umbilical cord stump. State's Exhibit number 10 is the is the right surfaces of baby boy doe, and it shows extensive soft tissue loss of the right surfaces of his torso.
And does that photo fairly and accurately depict the photograph that you have in your autopsy file?
Yes, it does.
Permission to publish.
Yes.
So, Doctor, can you walk us through in this picture any significant items for us to be aware of that were noted as important in Dr. Challoner's report?
On the left-hand surface of State's Exhibit 10 is the head, and on the right area is his left lower leg. In the background is his right arm. The central portion area is his torso, so that's going to be where the ribs, the abdomen, and the pelvic regions are. And there's no skin that's present. That has been torn off post-mortem, so after death, to reveal the underlying skeleton and soft tissues. In the center, there is an irregular brown structure that is most of the liver that is what was present. When someone who is injured while they're alive and blood is circulating, they are going to have specific colors with those injuries. So if it's a bruise, there's going to be a purplish gray from a fresh bruise. If it's a laceration, there's going to be some hemorrhage around the tissue, and a laceration is a tear. And that's what most of these injuries that you're seeing, those are lacerations. They're tears of the body. Abrasions are scrapes, and they typically will have a pink discoloration, and the abrasions that are in all of the photographs are more of a yellow, indicating that no blood was circulating at the time.
Was there a determination of any injury that would have not been post-mortem?
They are all post-mortem injuries. There's no after death, or prior to death injuries. They're called ante-mortem injuries. There's no ante-mortem injuries. They're all post-mortem injuries.
So, doctor, let's talk about the umbilical cord. Does the state that the umbilical cord is in, does that carry any importance in any of the findings of Dr. Challoner or your review of the case?
Yes, it does.
And can you explain what those would be?
For starters, the umbilical cord edge, and that's what that dark area is irregular. So that means that it was not cut or transected with a sharp instrument such as a scalpel or scissors, which is typically what has happened when a birth is in a hospital or with a nurse practitioner or something along those lines. So that gives the indication that the placenta, which is the organ that's on the inside of the mother's uterus, connected by the umbilical cord to the developing fetus, was torn away traumatically. The fact that that umbilical cord has not dried indicates that this child was not alive for a period of time, because what will happen is when the umbilical cord is cut, then the infant's immune system will start to react to that and dry it up and heal it down to a scab, to ultimately the point where we all have a belly button. So the fact that this is still glistening and not dried just indicates that this child did not live long enough for it to start drying.
And in your professional opinion, can you pinpoint when you say not long enough? Are we talking hours, minutes?
Hours.
Hours.
Yes. Dr. Challoner starts to describe what the inside organs look like. And there are, he describes that there is some organs that are missing, and he does state that there is some internal injuries to the pericardial sac, which is the membrane that encircles the heart. Where Dr. Challoner describes the trunk, he specifically describes the internal injuries, and he says that there is avulsion of the greater portion of the left lung with only the hilar remnants remaining. That's the area of the left lung that is right next to the heart. So almost all of the left lung is absent. There's also the spleen is missing, both kidneys, the stomach, the small intestines, and most of the colon, with only the rectum, which is the area down in the pelvis, were present. There's also the pancreas was not identified. Based on the color and the circumstances, it gives an indication that this child breathed for some time, because when the lungs are in the womb, they are going to be more of a brown color and collapsed, much like the color of the liver. So the fact that there is a more pink color means that the blood that was normally present there has now been pushed out to allow for the air sacs to expand. So the color helps with determining that this child was born alive or took a breath. Okay. The surface of the lung has a very uniform color, so it's not blotchy or patchy, which would be, with the uniform color would be the child breathed and it expanded the lungs and squeezed out the blood that was in there while the child was developing in the womb. So now it's replaced with air. Had this been forced air into the lungs, it would be more of a splotchy brown separated by the pink color. So that uniform color indicates breathing. They are described as portions are well aerated with scattered squames, squames, in alveoli. Some sections demonstrate atelectasis.
And can you put that into layman's terms for us?
portions are well aerated. That means air has gotten into the air sacs and distended them. The scattered squames are the skin cells that are from the fetus while in the womb. They get shed off and into the amniotic fluid, which is the fluid that bathes the baby while developing in the womb. So some of those are present in the air spaces. And then he describes atelectasis. That's collapse or non-expanded air sacs.
So when the child is still in utero, is the child breathing at all?
No.
So how does a child get oxygen while in utero?
Through the umbilical cord, which is connected to the mother, and so it's the mom's blood that is supplying the oxygen to the developing fetus.
And if a live child is birthed, what prompts the child to start breathing?
Its own requirement. So the nervous system will alert the baby to take a breath because its oxygen level has now decreased because it has been separated from the placenta, which is the source of oxygen. And so, you know, in the TV shows, you might see, well, they'll spank the baby or startle the baby. That will help stimulate the child to breathe. But normal infants will breathe on their own, given some patience. That's how God developed the nervous system and the whole body to work.
Now, is there any possibility that, the pushing out through the vaginal canal and then having the child come into an air-filled room, is there any way that the lungs could look the way they do without the child actually taking a breath himself?
Not to this degree. So there can be some, some opening of some of the air spaces, but certainly not 55 to 60%. So the majority of the lung tissues. You can get some opening up just from going through the birth canal.
And so, Doctor, we previously went over Dr. Challoner's findings that this was a full-term live-born male infant. You had indicated that you agreed with his findings. Is that?
I do. Yep, still do.